Welcome to this week's meeting of the Rockland Board of Selectmen, coming to you live on WRPS from the H. Bernard Monahan Memorial Room at Rockland Town Hall. On the agenda this week, we've got an appointment for the plumbing and gas inspector, a request for a liquor license, and a review of the special town meeting warrant. Now here's the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Ed Kimball.
Good evening. Welcome to tonight's meeting. Would you all please rise and join us for a Pledge of Allegiance? Larry? Would you like to lead us, Mr. Ryan? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you all please remain standing for a moment of silence for Bob Biggins? Thank you. Good evening and welcome. Please be advised this open meeting is being broadcast live and recorded by WRPS for playback on Comcast Channel 14 and Verizon Channel 31. It will also be available for online video on demand viewing at WRPSRockland.com within 24 hours of its conclusion. As are other recently recorded meeting and community events, please go to WRPSRockland.com for further information. With that, we have community announcements, and I want to mention that we have Anastasia Humphrey in the audience. She is watching Democracy in Action, and she's a Stonehill political science student. Next up, we have minutes. Item number 2, open session minutes of March 20th, 2018.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? It's a unanimous vote. Thank you. Item number 3, executive session minutes of March 20th, 2018.
I make a motion to approve, but pending release until all matters are settled.
Second. All those in favor? Again, unanimous vote. Thank you. Okay, for agenda items, item number 4, we have appointment of the plumbing and gas inspector. And I see Stacy Callahan, and I see Mr. Tom Rubel in the audience, our building inspector. Tom?
Stacy and Bill Callahan, I thank you for inviting us here tonight. This is Bill Callahan. He passed all of our exams and the interviews. We interviewed 6. There was one candidate that didn't even make the interview because he wasn't even a plumber, so we didn't even interview him. But Bill is well qualified. Just to give the board a heads up, even though we had recommended Bill towards you, I have a lot of work that I still have to do at the building department as far as different procedures. We also have some voids on paying for off-duty hours, paying when somebody's on vacation. So I'm scrutinizing all of that, but I would still like to appoint Bill so that we keep going forward with our inspections. But just to give the board a heads up that I am doing some scrutinizing at the building department with policies. But Bill was highly recommended with respect to dentals. So I would like to recommend something to do a vote to accept.
Any questions from the board?
Can we hear from Bill?
Yeah.
Is that right? And just if you can introduce yourself,
Sure.
who you are.
Bill Callahan. I live here in Rockland, been plumbing since approximately 1983. Master plumber for 12, 15 years. Did approximately 9 years of residential and kind of moved forward from there through commercial. Right now, I'm an estimator and a project manager for a company. Most of our work is in Boston. So it's got a good cross-section of residential through commercial, which kind of brings me to here.
And also training, you've done some training.
I have done training. I was over in South Shore Tech for approximately 8 years, teaching first and second year apprentices. Then I moved over to Harold Brothers, did the same thing for first year apprentices also.
Any other questions for anybody else on the board?
You mentioned that you have some policy stuff you need to work on. Do you have a copy of the job description for us?
Yes. I'd also like to say that Stacy's been my backbone on this project. Let's see if I can find it. Stacy, who used to advertise?
And this is the updated one? Because I know that we needed to be updated, correct?
Yes, there's one that we need to put, I've also talked to Eric, and we need to put another item on as far as vacation time goes. Things haven't been working right. Somebody who goes on vacation, or somebody who needs to be sick, who covers, and that person pays them out of his money. We should have a line item for that.
Mr. Rubel, could you use the microphone?
Like I have on my contract, I want to have on theirs.
Can you explain that again? I'm sorry.
Okay, if Bill goes on vacation, he has an alternate. Right now, that alternate, Bill would have to pay while he goes on vacation. Pay that alternate out of his budget. Okay? It shouldn't be like that. We should have a vacation pay / aid, mutual aid. There should be.
When I spoke with him earlier today, we're just talking about segregating a line item so we can track when there's going to be a vacation coverage. He's looking for still the same amount of money for the budget for the particular department. He's just looking to segregate it so that later when we take a look at what the expenditures are and who we've hired to go out versus who comes and covers them, we'll be able to tell which one went through which line item. So it's just the addition of a line item with no additional money. It's just splitting a few $100, I think, out of the original line item.
How long does that take to do?
Not a problem. We can set it up for the next town meeting.
Next time. So this won't be fixed till town meeting?
Well, we won't have any.
I could
vacations
actually,
then.
I could create the line item and start splitting the costs right away because it's a bottom line budget for the department, so that's not an issue. But as far as, voting it as a separate line item, it's gonna have to wait obviously for town meeting.
What are the concerns with the way we're paying right now? What's happening?
I don't, except for the fact that I personally like to track things in more detail if I can. So I prefer to have line items match what the expenditure is supposed to be. So I'm in favor of it.
So will he 1090 the guy who replaces him then? He pays him?
Excuse me, he's not going to pay him anymore. We inherited, and this is one of the things that I'm kind of surprised that it's been ongoing this long, but like any town, there were ways that the old town, Larry, you and I talk about all the time. This is the way we used to do it. Tom inherited a system. In fact, the previous plumbing inspector actually got the job because the plumbing inspector before him said, listen, I'm leaving that job. You want my job? There was no interview by anyone, nobody by the board. The guy gave his job away. I remember saying, you got your job? I get to pick the town administrator when I leave. I get to say, hey, Larry, you want my job? So there are some changes that we've recognized, and we certainly recognize the way we're addressing payroll here has been wrong. In the past, because you only have one, the plumbing inspector was getting paid all the money, but then he would compensate the guy who filled in for him personally. He'd put in for the hours, then he'd pay for the hours or whatever. We know that's wrong. We are now addressing it.
When I came aboard, I had a half a page for a contract. I now have 9 pages in my contract, but everything was detailed.
Is this a contract position or is this a
No,
at-will
that's what Stacy
position?
said.
So this position has been at will, and there's been nothing documented. There's no contract or a personnel plan or anything for the electrical inspectors or the plumbing inspectors. So I have already put together a personnel plan that I'm waiting for Attorney Clifford to approve because it's a part-time, non-benefit eligible position. It's under 20 hours, so there's no contract. It's an at-will position.
Is it possible for us to wait to appoint till that's done?
Well, I mean, I don't, right now, we're paying an alternate inspector, so I don't know that it makes any difference.
I just know it's sort of
Honestly, the
been
way
like
that
this for a while, and I'm wondering why it isn't already done.
Well,
I'm not trying to
honestly,
be,
well, there's no.
I'm just wondering why,
there's nothing to me. I
if
just-
we
I'm
knew
just
we were
calling since
advertising, why
they're
we wouldn't have
redoing
done it
everything.
first, you know? Just kind of a cart before the horse thing.
Well, the personnel plan was put together once we found out that there weren't any, but you have to understand that we haven't had a human resource department or a personnel department in place here for,
We know what the
Up
job
until 2 years
responsibilities
ago,
are,
so,
but we need
um,
somebody in the position.
right. So so all of these types of positions that are now coming to fruition, same thing with a lot of the union jobs. They come up and their job descriptions are 25 years old. So that has to be approved through the union. So everything's a process here. So once the position comes up, then we have to dive into it and kind of figure out, you know, where we go from here. But there were certainly some situation here where it was been an at-will, a verbal at-will for all of
But now
these years.
but I'm looking at this, and this is a contract now, yes? Because it
It's
says
an-
employment agreement with Rockland and William Callahan.
It's a personnel plan, which,
This?
that hasn't been approved by the attorney yet. So is that what you just?
This is what, yeah, this is
Oh,
what Tom.
that-
Yeah, nothing's been approved. We're just working on that now. Like I said at the beginning when I came up to the podium, I told him that I have issues that I need to straighten. It's not just the plumbing, gas, it's electrical also.
I've done a salary comp and some other work around these positions, and to be quite frank, these towns don't have contracts. It depends upon the town you live in. Some have a wage classification system, and our department heads and managers don't have contracts. They're in a wage classification system. So want the electrical, so want the plumbers. So our town is a little bit unique that almost everyone has a contract or is part of a union, as opposed to having a personnel plan from management down, with the exception of the CBAs and the bargaining units. But we're working towards trying to get, you know, on a,
Yeah, I appreciate the work, and I know it's not easy. I would just feel more comfortable, I think, if this stuff was approved and ready to go before we hired somebody.
The
That's just my
building
opinion.
inspector's contract actually designates that he gets to appoint those people. He's bringing his recommendation forward to say this is his selection,
He gets to recommend those people.
recommend those. It's with his
We'll make a motion to
approval.
appoint. You need the guys, there's one guy covering versus another guy covering. You might as well have the guy you want covering. So I'm gonna make a motion to appoint because it's not gonna make any difference if we wait until, you know, it's just gonna make it harder for the building department to function. So let's let them function and we'll straighten the whole mess out.
Second. I just have one question, Mr. Chairman. And going forward, like I understand this whole process is under review and everything else. Like as part of that, could there be some consideration, like in the future, of having the resume or the application of the of the recommended person come before us as well, just so you know, we have a better idea of the you know, Mr. Callahan, you know, seems like a great guy tonight, but just and going forward to have the you know the broader picture of you know, the applicant or the finalist or of whoever's being recommended.
I know there's a motion on the floor, but I would at least maybe like the board to consider that. Maybe we can appoint Mr. Callahan as the alternate until we can get the contract squared away, if that would make other people. So that you can still do the job, and then the contract can be verified or ensure that it's legal by town council, and then at least we're clean, and that doesn't affect the building department to go through and be able to perform the services. You're still the same individual, but it also gives everyone, if they have any discomfort with knowing that it's a legal document that has been approved by town council, might be a way to find that. And I know there's a motion, I'm only adding that because we really want to do two things. We want to make sure that as we found out that things are done, we'll say, differently than they should be done in the year 2018, we want to make sure we comply. And secondly, we want to make sure that for the citizens of Rockland, that they're not held up from an inspection. I mean, the value, as Eric had said earlier, is really indifferent, because whether we pay a temporary alternate or an alternate from other towns, it's the same thing. So I don't know, I know that we have an executive leader, and this isn't on the agenda of that, but we could certainly ask Mr. Clifford what the response time could be, and getting the document back to you, Stacy, and Tom, and then we can put on the next agenda. But I'm only suggesting that. I know there's a motion on how the board feels about that. I mean, that might be able to cure the problem for tonight and still make sure that,
Is it my motion to appoint them assistant,
Do we have a line item for an alternate?
alternate?
I don't believe that.
No, but it's a bottom line budget
It
anyway.
is a bottom line budget. I just prefer to have additional line items to track something like that. What if he decides that he's too busy, and now all of a sudden you look down at the other line item, and, you know, all the money's going out through the alternate because he's not available? You might want to look at that and go, you know, we might want to find somebody else. I'm sure it will not be the case, but I just, you know, it's just a way of tracking it, you know?
And,
And to answer regarding the resume, absolutely, this is the first time I've actually ever gone through an appointment. Everything has been either department head down that has gone through the town administrator and the department head, so I'd be happy to do that in the future. Just attach it to the appointment letter, or our recommendation.
Exactly, yeah,
Okay.
like, I mean, like, you laid it out, actually really well anyways, I mean, in terms of the background, but just to see something from the applicant and,
Absolutely.
how
And I
they.
can still forward that to you if you want to see it.
so we have a motion. Do you want to amend the motion, or are you good with your original motion?
What would you like me to amend it to?
Well, I don't know. I suggested, in order to cure it for tonight, it was strongly suggested, I might add, because I gave you an elbow to the
Yeah,
ribs.
I hear you.
was, in order for
For him to go on, appoint him as an alternate.
as the interim inspector, until we can have a contract that
Interim
meets the
alternate inspector?
meets the satisfaction of town council.
So you just want me to add the word interim? I will. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? So, 4-1.
So that is until town council approves the contract?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, we want to ensure that, based on the fact that it's been brought to light that things in the past weren't tracked properly, or they weren't done as they should be to make sure someone's paid, we want to make sure that it's proper.
I echo the chairman.
So,
We, and that's exactly what we've been trying to do.
no, and I
As
understand
it's
that. A
come
lot
to
of
light,
things that happen in town.
we have not been happy, and we said, what? But
Well, I think what happens in town a lot, until you actually have the an issue come up, no one really pays attention to it until it's really in front of us.
right.
Right.
And I know, no disrespect to the gentleman before us, but it's something that, you know, is housekeeping for us as a town, so we want to make sure we have, this is the only opportunity we can actually do the housekeeping and clean it up. And then moving forward, and then at least the process is in place through HR, which a lot of towns don't even have HR, I might add, so it's actually good.
You want to keep that?
No, you can take it.
So, thank you and welcome aboard, at least until the next meeting.
There you go.
Welcome, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you for the process,
Thank you.
our people, Tom and Stacy.
Thanks, Bill.
Item number 5, the request for the one-day liquor license by the Doubletree Hilton has been postponed to the next meeting. Item number 6, we have South Shore Votech presentation. And who do we have here tonight? I see Mr. Mahoney in the audience.
Superintendent Hickey is with us. Are you gonna?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name's Tom Hickey. I'm the superintendent director at South Shore Votech, joined by your representative to our regional school committee, Bob Mahoney. So we have before you an article request for spring town meeting. It is a series of amendments to our school's regional agreement. And this is a process, very briefly, to just give you some context. The agreement was originally created in 1960, and it was amended a couple of times in the mid-1980s when Whitman and Hanson joined the school district. We were fortunate to get a state grant on efficiency and regionalization in 2017 that helped pay for the expenses to review this agreement. We were also, at the time, talking with the town of Hull about possibly joining the district. So part of the grant was also to allow them to put some funds in to do an analysis. So one of the tangible outcomes of this grant was a revised regional agreement. And so our responsibility is to go through our, we had a subcommittee of our school committee, along with the full school committee vote to submit this to our 8 respective towns. So what you have before you tonight is a copy of the original regional agreement with some strike-throughs showing the recommended changes. Before bringing this to our towns and before taking the step to 8 different town meetings, we also submitted this to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for legal review. In the interest of time, I'd be happy to do a deep dive wherever you'd like, but I would presume to just walk you through some of the articles and point out some of the changes. I'm happy to say that the bulk of the work that we did not produce any major changes to the agreement. There's a lot of language in there from 1960 that is no longer relevant. A lot of what you see stricken in blue would reflect that. I do think we've done a pretty good job of trying to reorganize the agreement so that it is easier. It's easier to follow after spending so much time with it. You know, you become more familiar with it. But for an average reader that might go to our website and see it, I think that this cleaned up version does the job. So I'll go through at a reasonable pace. Please feel free to interrupt if there's something specific you'd like to ask about. The preamble to the agreement merely incorporates Whitman and Hanson officially, as they were previously in the 1980s put in elsewhere in the agreement. In Section 1 on the School District Committee and in Section 4, we basically were removing language that was significant for the formation of the school in 1960. So deleting language on the interim committee, the elected members, etc. In Section 2 of the agreement, called Location of the Regional District School, we added at our level, we wanted to add the phrase, or any other member town. So the agreement currently says that the school would be located in Hanover. So by adding that phrase, what we're saying in the future is, if there were a reason for the school to be located elsewhere in our 8-town district, it potentially could be. So that was a local discussion and a local adjustment.
Just a quick question, if I
Sure,
may.
please.
Does that mean that you could potentially have a second campus as well?
Yes, and for a period of time in the 1980s, we did have an Abington campus before merging. So yes, the satellite campuses would be permitted, yes. Section, Section 3, there were some adjustments there. We tried to make as many statutory references as we could. In Section 4, we label the section on budget, essentially stripping out the language that was applicable to the very first budget of the school district since its inception, and making it a simpler process by referencing the necessary statutes for regional school districts. So essentially, our process for preparing a budget, communicating that budget, nothing changes. We're governed by the statute in Chapter 71. We did spend a considerable amount of time trying to better clarify some of the financial concepts of capital and debt. When we looked at the original agreement, both capital and debt were talked about in the same section. And it's not necessarily the case that a capital item, say a piece of vocational equipment, would necessarily be debt. So as part of our cleanup, we segregated the two sections. So you will see debt, you'll see the different types of costs that go into an assessment and how it's apportioned. That's what will bring you through the bulk of the work we did in Section 5. So we can now say that instead of just having operating costs and debt, or capital, we specify we have operating costs, we have transportation costs, we have debt and capital. And that's so that when we bring an annual assessment request, it spells out all the various categories of how we come up with that number. And that section, that goes into Section 5. I'll say that in Section 5B, there's a considerable new section called Apportionment of Operating Costs. That section there is something that the Department of Education suggested. As I said earlier, we haven't amended this agreement since the 1980s, so the Education Reform Act, Chapter 70 funding, et cetera, that's totally divorced from this current agreement. So this essentially memorializes the process about how minimum local contributions are set, and that is spelled out through that section. Then we have a section on capital costs where we specify, in a couple of places in the agreement, we talk about using enrollment data, and we use 3 years of enrollment. We're looking at years. So we wanted to clarify years meaning fiscal years, so that, again, there's no confusion. Does a year mean a calendar year or a fiscal year? So I think that's also helpful. In the section on debt, which is in same section 5D, we wanted to clarify that, as I said earlier, we had an impetus for this conversation was because there might have been another community interested in joining. By the way, that decision is something that is subject to all town meeting, the town meetings would vote on that. But we wanted to make clear that if we were ever to have a new town join the district in the future, that there has to be a way of dealing that town in to existing debt or capital expenses. It's not a radical concept, but it's in this section that we spell it out clearly, because we use 3 years of enrollment data to calculate a town's share of debt. So what would happen if hypothetically we had $1 million in debt and we already took care of that and everybody voted on it, we brought a new town in? How do we deal them in? This section spells that out clearly, that until a town would have 3 years of enrollment data, we would take the existing enrollment data and we would multiply it in year 1 by a factor of 3, in year 2 by a factor of 1.5. And then after 3 years of enrollment data, we would be able to use that data to calculate that. Again, that's a rarity, but we felt it needed to be spelled out accordingly. We also have a section on transportation, again, pretty...
Sorry, why are you using factors of 3 and 1.5?
Sure. In order to, I guess, level the playing field, if we had debt and we were going to have this new town share a portion of it, if I have 1 year worth of enrollment data, multiplying it by 3 would be it's essentially taking that 1 year and tripling it, which would be the equivalent of 3 years. Yeah. And then with 2 years, we'd split it. Yeah, split it in half. That's right. Okay. And then in section 6 of the agreement, this is a section we wanted to carve out, make clear to folks regarding the incurring of debt. This is a very important topic in terms of how does a regional school, how would we be able to borrow money? It's not something that happens very often. But there are 3 options in the statute that the regional school committee could cite when voting to incur debt. Again, that's only the beginning of the process. The school committee has the authority to authorize that. They have to cite the section of the statute, and then that communication goes to the town. So the last time that our school district incurred debt would have been in 2010, when we had a roof and window project through the MSBA. And there was a vote of the school committee to do so, and it ended up on 8 town meeting warrants. And under that model, you needed all 8 communities to approve it in order for the debt to be incurred. So the statute spells out 3 ways that you can incur debt. And in my opportunities to talk to our communities about this, I will point out to you the 2 very straightforward ones. The first one is referenced as Chapter 71, Section lowercase d, Paragraph 1, which is what I just described. Every town votes at a town meeting. It has to be unanimous. That's one way of incurring debt. And that's what the school committee did in 2010. Another way of incurring debt is using a different section of the statute, which is lowercase n, which is a district-wide ballot. So, in other words, if a regional school district wanted to incur debt, and they didn't want to do it by 8 separate town meetings,
Majority rules.
you could have an aggregate majority of the 8 towns in the district. The cost of the election would be at the expense of the school district. So that's available under the statute. And then there is a very bad option, still in the statute, which is lowercase d, Paragraph 2, which I've said to Bob and others. I've never seen it used. I wouldn't even, the way it's written right now, recommend it. Basically what the provision allows for regional vocational districts is that you could incur debt, and you could incur it with only 2/3 of your communities supporting it. And the communities that said no would not have to take on that share of the debt. Right. So my message to the committee is, yes, it's an option, but I don't think it's going to foster a lot of collaboration amongst communities. So I would urge you to never use that option. But if that section of the law gets amended in the future and it gets corrected, personally I think that the option, the most plausible options would be the one that we've used in the past, and then this 16N, which is this district ballot.
Can I stop you there for a second? So I have a question. Typically, if we go through and we do a capital improvement in town, we'll do a debt exclusion. The way I read the document here, that it's not an exclusion, it's an assessment. And it goes towards, it's based on the cost of tuition. Or separate, or we'll say spread across the cost of tuition. if you will.
Yes, we will always only bring you one number, and that is our assessment. And so the sticker shock of all of a sudden taking on debt, it's not separated out. There would not be successive votes. So if we were to vote, a debt project, and we knew when it was going to go into effect, it's going to go into effect in fiscal '20. When we were coming with our fiscal '20 assessment, you would see the number, what the heck happened here? And that increased debt would be just part of that one number. So you're right, it's not a separate debt exclusion. When we come to you with a number, if that number is not affordable, it's our job to explain where did this number come from, but at the end of the day, it would still be one number. Now, interestingly, we've got about a $13.4 million budget. Our current debt is about $115,000 a year on that roof I mentioned, about a 10-year roof. That rolls off in December of 2021. Prior to that debt in 2010, we took on debt to combine the campuses in Hanover in 1992. So there's been some measure of debt. So I would go out on a limb and say that probably in 1990 or 91, when we probably went from having no debt to the debt of that addition, that's where there was probably that, where did this spike in assessment come from? But since then, we've had the debt on the addition, we've paid that off, and now we have this debt. But in the future, if we had a sizable project, you would see it baked into one number.
When I worked in Halifax, we did a debt exclusion for, I believe it was the regional school there. It was large, it was like a $105 million school we did. And I thought it came for all the towns, and we did the debt exclusion. I know right now, you're not looking for as large an amount of money because you're looking to just do, I believe, a roof over and stuff's coming up in some time in the future. But say you get to the point where you want to replace your school or add a satellite school, to have the burden of a large increase come onto our rolls here is going to dramatically impact the school because they eat that within their budget. Is there no mechanism, because I was looking at the general laws that you cited here, and I know there's other general laws under Chapter 44 that would allow you to do debt exclusions for something large. I see nothing in the agreement for that, and to me, it kind of makes me wonder whether that's going to be all right or not if you guys decide to do something large. Have you explored that, or have you asked your counsel for any type of advice on that? Because I got to tell you, you'd get pushback, I believe, on a large increase from, I know this town, and probably other towns. And if it was a debt exclusion, we might be able to get the departments behind it as opposed to having it eat away at some of our services within our debt, within our levy limit.
So I think that if that option is available, if we could incur debt, I think it would ultimately, from a council point of view, it would come down to what would the warrant article look like. So you're right. I have not seen any examples of debt exclusion through regional agreements such as this. It never came up as an option. But if the school committee has the ability to authorize the incurring of the debt, one of the factors that's obviously important for you and town officials would be the length of it. How long are we financing? Yeah.
But if you don't mind, I'd like to at least look into if there's a section of law that, has this been approved yet by any town?
Yes, it has. Yeah, it's been approved by Whitman. But I would certainly not be opposed to bringing to the committee. I'd like to be able, to move this forward. But if you think there's additional language, we looked at other regional agreements. So I can certainly reach back out to the consultants we worked with to see if there's any statutory reference or whether you have to make a statutory reference for Chapter 44 in here. But we were only. The focus has been on 71.
And the last thing I just want to bring up is on page 11 in the red line area that comes in under incurring your debt.
Yeah.
You've got Chapter 71, Section 16, and then you cite D in the several subsections. You just didn't put Section 16 before the D and the N, and you might just want to clean it up.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So picking up the pace, The rest of the document regarding amendments and admission process for new member towns, I want to bring to your attention, there is one local change we wanted to make. To amend this agreement would require a unanimous vote. All 8, let me put it this way, all 8 communities would have to affirm it at a town meeting, not a unanimous vote at the respective town meetings. We felt that when this was written in 1960 and there were 6 communities, there was probably a rationale for having everybody on board all the time. It was only the second such school in the Commonwealth. So locally, we feel as though having a 2/3 vote to amend this agreement is a slightly easier way of doing business while still having a pretty high threshold. So in this Section 7, there is a specific concrete recommended adjustment, which would be to have a 2/3 vote of communities to change the agreement. And I would also point out to you that the Department of Education advised us that after this entire process, so if we were to get 8 affirmative votes this spring, it then goes to the Commissioner of Education, who ultimately has the final say on approving it. I would assume that there would be no reason for the Commissioner to hold up the approval, but that's also written in to the very end of Section 7. In Section 8 on the admission process for new member towns, we added in some language that gives the regional school committee the ability to discuss potential buy-in costs for any new member community. The town of Hull was looking into joining. They had some internal back and forth over this. Again, scarce resources, declining enrollments, cost. We all know the story. But one of the things that our committee was very clear on, even at the beginning of exploring this, is that to invite a new member community in to a fixed asset that communities have been paying into and maintaining for decades cannot simply be a, oh sure, come on in and we'll deal you into a portion of this fixed asset. So at the end of the day, if this had gone forward with the town of Hull and the school committee the subcommittee had worked on potential buy-in costs, it does not give the school committee the authority to determine that, but ultimately going to our communities, I'm pretty sure that our communities would care deeply about what is the benefit? So what's the cost of them joining? So this just memorializes the ability of our committee to have that conversation. And I think that that's an important feature, at least at the beginning stages of any conversation of a new community joining. Similarly, in Section 9, there's a whole section, and most of this isn't new, on how does a town withdraw? How do you withdraw from this regional district? How do you what's the process that's involved? The Department of Education gave us a little bit of guidance on this as they have strengthened or changed the approach. So in Section A, we have some language in red that talks about you can only withdraw as of July 1st. I'm sure that for budgeting reasons, that's one of the reasons they put that. And that it's also a 2-year process, so that it's not an immediate decision. And my sense is that part of that is due to looking at, again, budgetary impact and student enrollment as well. If all of a sudden you're still in the school district, you're still in the schoolhouse, and your town leaves the district, what does that mean in terms of enrollment numbers and tuition and whatnot? So the bottom line is that you need the communities to agree, and we're proposing, again, a 2/3 threshold, and then there's a 2-year process for basically leaving the district. And that's essentially what Section 9 deals with. But equally as important, we also updated the section on the obligations of a withdrawing member town. Again, hypothetically, just because a town withdraws doesn't mean that there might not also be some financial liabilities while the town was there. OPEB would be a perfect example of that. So there's language in that says, okay, maybe there's a town that leaves, maybe the conditions and the reasons are legitimate, but if there are obligations, there are still obligations. That's right. And then to round it out, sections 10, 11, and 12, we struck one of the sections. We clarified the section on tuition students, referencing the statute. What we have done as a long-standing practice, and I don't see that changing, is that when we collect non-resident tuition, we collect it in one fiscal year, and we use it to offset assessments in the following year. And the state under 7116D.5 it allows us to use those funds if we needed to in the middle of a school year, if we were in a pinch and we needed to use those collected funds for the education of non-resident students. Our practice has been that we haven't had to do that. So this section here essentially says that we're following the law. That's what Section 10 deals with. And that section on tuition students, at least the original part in black, has been there from the beginning. Section 11, you see a section that's stricken on advisory committees. That referred to the original school building. So again, this is a 1960 document. The building didn't open until 62. So that section is eliminated. It's no longer relevant. We have a building. Section 11 on the annual report talks about how we submit annual reports to all of our towns that get published. And we cleaned up the end. There was an entire section on the admission of Whitman and Hanson, which we embedded in the preamble way back at the beginning of this chat. So that's our regional agreement. We'll be presenting this at the remaining 7 respective town meetings between Situate next week and Cohasset at the end of April, and then I'm going to have a cardboard cutout of myself for the first Monday of May. We'll get a few towns to go to that night, and we'll see that process through in the month of May.
Any chance of having an index added to the front of it so you could find the sections that pertain to, if you go through the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that would, I mean, I would, I think for ease of reviewing at respective town meetings and what we put on our website, that would be, Mr. Chairman, very easy to do. Yeah.
Just so if you're looking for a particular...
I'm happy people would be looking. Yes, let's do that. That's great. So, thank you.
Any questions from the board?
I just have one question, and I thank you, Superintendent Hickey. I agree with Eric's thought. One of the things we're trying to do as a town right now, we're planning for like a new elementary project. We're planning for, like a fire station proposal, like a whole bunch of things. And so the challenge of although I understand it here, like, is actually kind of a two-prong. One, like if you include capital needs or capital projects in the assessment, and that goes right to the assessment, yes, and then to our fiscal year operating budget, and like and as you know, our revenues are very limited. So when you have potentially a big, significant new outlay in terms of an assessment that we might not really easily have the revenues for without like actually cutting programs here, how do we balance that with, my concern is, number one, how do we balance that with our own priorities, even though I understand why, that obviously as a school system, you have to address your capital needs as well, and you need money to do that.
But we have to be mindful of what are the communities who pay the bills and what they can afford to do. I just thought of something as you were re-asking the question that Eric asked earlier. And Eric, it might be, if you're willing to do a search, I'll do the same. Cape Tech, the regional vocational school that's based in Harwich, okay, they are in the MSBA pipeline, and they're getting a brand new school.
Okay.
And I might be mistaken, but I think the town of Barnstable, if I'm playing this out correctly, I think the town of Barnstable did their own debt exclusion in order to finance. So the regional school committee votes for this, and it goes to the various communities. The town of Barnstable having a sizable chunk of that project determined at the local level that a debt exclusion to pay for the Cape Tech new building was right for Barnstable, but perhaps for one of the communities where it's like our version of Cohasset, which would be a very, very thin sliver. That may be the answer.
I don't think actually you're allowed as yourselves to do it in Chapter 71. I think, and if I remember back, I think it was exactly that situation.
Is that
It was
okay?
The towns had to do it in Section 44, and they all divided up what the cost was based on, I think it was student population and a situation like that. And I didn't mean to just hop on you without saying, by the way, this was a really great job of getting this thing.
Not at all.
It's a great job.
Thank you. Thanks. It was a lot. The committee put. I appreciate that. It's a lot to explain. You folks have a lot to do, and you're trying to follow a lot. And but I appreciate your attention. And That would be my thought. In terms of big projects, if I could just steal
Yeah,
one more
no,
minute, had a great conversation with the Finance Committee when we were talking about this year's budget. We've done a master facilities audit. It's on our website. We've got, we had an engineering firm come in to kick the tires on the building. We feel like we need more space. It's a 125,000 square foot building, the majority of which is from 1962. It's very well maintained, and we do not need a new building. And we're also not looking for anything right now. But we are definitely saying, we're saying to our communities that, at least what I'm saying, asking our school committee to do in the next year is, we have to take a look at this audit more closely. We have to take a look at some of the basic maintenance, and we have to decide whether or not whether we adopt a strategy of, let's see if the MSBA invites us. We've submitted a statement of interest. If they invite us, you folks know all about that and how long that takes. And as Eric alluded earlier, we're looking at a roof on our 1992 addition. I still call it the new wing. It's not the new wing anymore. We need a new roof. But it's not a crisis, and we don't manage things that way. And the least we can do is to telegraph this early. So even if we go quiet for a little while, we're not going to wait and just all of a sudden pop up next winter saying, guess what? We've got our regular ask plus, a debt project.
In your letter of interest, is the intent to increase enrollment?
That would be, do we have a demand to increase enrollment? We certainly do. We are limited by a few factors. We don't have any real buildable land. We're kind of boxed in by some wetlands. But we do have, at the very least, Mr. Chairman, we want to be able to create enough space to serve the kids who are there. That's difficult for me to say, because I know that we could serve more kids if there was more space. But for right now, I would be a happy man if I could upgrade to code the 1962 building to allow me to take $1 million to add on an addition to our automotive shop. But I can't add a single square foot to the building because the entire building would need to be brought up to code, which would trigger, several $1 million, cheaper than, the big ticket, major renovations. So again, if MSBA invites us in, we will proceed accordingly, and we've got money available to cover feasibility costs, which will eliminate another spike in assessments in another year or two. So for me, that's an important first step. But if all of a sudden we weren't included for whatever reason, maybe the curse is that the building is in good enough shape, but then we'll have to adopt a more piecemeal approach. So we're kind of hamstrung. We can't add on in a targeted location until we upgrade everything. But we're going to try. We're going to take some pretty pragmatic steps, work on some improved access. They're estimating, for instance, real quick, they're estimating maybe $250,000 to upgrade our septic system. Now, $250,000 could be a one-year capital. I could bring it as a capital request as part of our assessment. But most of the other items are much bigger than that. You can't shoehorn in $1 million for a roof in 1 year. That is going to throw everything off. So for right now, fiscal 19 that's in the rearview mirror in terms of our ask. But maybe as aggressively as early as 2020, we're talking. But we won't know anything from MSB until this December, and then we'll proceed from there.
No, I appreciate your candor, and I appreciate, the effort you put into it. And I think it's a great school. I know I've had some family relatives who have actually
Yes, you have.
attended.
Yes, you have. They've done quite well.
They have. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alan.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. Did a great job.
Now, do we have a place setter on the warrant for anything?
On the warrant.
So it's on the warrant?
It's a determination made by town meeting.
Okay.
He was looking for the opportunity to have an audience and certainly explain it to
No, I think you did
the
a great
board
job
and the viewers.
explaining
And
Very thorough.
I know we cleared up a few questions that I've had with a number of the members, so it does not require a vote of the board. It's already on the warrant. It's a town meeting vote.
it. Okay. Well, moving right along then. Item number 7, the Youth Commission update. Jean Blaney.
Good evening.
Why,
Good evening.
How are you? Thank
How are
you
you?
for letting me come up here and speak. I have Ethan Schnabel with me, and I'm going to talk a little bit why he's standing next to me. But just to give you a quick little snapshot of our programs that we had over the winter, and this is a real quick snapshot because there's a lot of them, but our February vacation camp was a huge success. We had on average 75 children every day, ranging in ages for 4 to 14. We ran 4 basketball seasons, which we've never done before, so that was excellent. So the average class size was 25, and we did 3 separate classes every Saturday. So we're currently running a drama program, which we could use a few more children in. It's grades K through 6. And we also ran 2 sessions of volleyball, so that volleyball net that we bought was put to good use. So that's excellent. Upcoming programs, we just have our Chipmunk Open House, which is our preschool and our nursery school open house. That's April 12th, 6 to 7 p.m., and that's for kids ages 3 to 5. We want adults to come and bring their children. We have the Easter egg hunt, which is going to be happening at Memorial Stadium on April 14th. Yes, we know it's voting day. And so that's from 1 to 2:30 p.m. in our April vacation program. Now, so the community center sees a lot of traffic. On average, every day we see approximately 200 people come and go out of the community center, and that's combined youth commission programs, daycare program, WIC, and self-help, which is our free programs in there. And then that actually increases up to 300, give or take a few, seasonally and daily. So given that, and given the state of the country and everything that's been going on within the schools, we have become somewhat of a locked facility. So we've closed all of our doors. We've actually put emergency plans in place, myself, including the daycare department, our custodian, the folks in my office, and Marissa. So that actually was through the help of Ethan. So Ethan actually has been training throughout the schools, doing active shooter training, and it's called Alice. So that's why Ethan's here. We recently went through it at our building. It was very nerve-wracking, I'm not gonna lie. I thought I was gonna be really calm, cool, and collective, because, you know, that's me, but I wasn't. It gave me a sense of reality that, wow, okay, so we really got to get down and dirty with our training. And so we asked Ethan to come in and teach all of our teachers, and the night went very well. But he's here to answer any questions you have about it, and to maybe talk about the whole process, because I really don't want to mess that up.
Jean's been very proactive about safety and security within the building. I've been in the SRO role for a little over 2 years now, so pretty much from day one she's been consulting with me. We've been talking about ways to maybe shore up the building security-wise. I know there's the challenges of it being an older building, but that doesn't mean we can not do something to make it safer for everybody that's there. We've discussed a number of different ways to lock down if needed. We've gotten the school involved with maybe improving some of the ways to lock down. But one of the things we identified was maybe making sure some of the staff had good training in terms of how to respond to an active shooter type situation, or even just an armed intruder. It doesn't have to be an actual shooting. We use the Alice model, which is used. I've taught all the teachers within the school district. We're in the point now where we're going to start to transition to teaching the students. We held a parent night about 2 weeks ago that kind of informed parents who wanted to come was what our goal is. So using that, we kind of trickle down over towards youth commission and the daycare. Alice real quickly stands for alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. That's the acronym. It doesn't have to go in that order. I'm not going to give a 45-minute presentation on it, but that's really what it is. So we give a PowerPoint presentation to their staff for about 45 minutes. And after that, everything was all hands-on. We walked them through everything step by step, bit by bit, and then we kind of put some more decision-making in their hands. We didn't tell them what to do. We let them decide how they wanted to do it and what they needed to do. And really, it's interesting to see how each group adapts to it. The first time, a couple of them did things they didn't really realize what's a good way to secure their room. But we went through and we kind of gave them some pointers, gave them some tips, and after that, they were great. I think they're ready to go. If something was to happen, I think they're well educated on what they can do. They had a lot of good questions, and they're definitely concerned about the safety of their students.
So, so with Ethan's training, the Alice training that we did, both daycare and myself, we're going to do some ongoing training. I'll be doing training with my summer staff, because the summer staff not only uses Hartsoft Park, it also uses the building, as well as we're going to get Marissa's staff involved, because daycare's summer program actually uses our building as well. In addition to that, Self-Help has asked if we could do some training with them, and so hasn't WIC, because they both reside in our buildings. So I just wanted to give you an update that we're moving forward and trying to secure our building and keep our kids safe, as well as the schools are too.
Any questions from the board?
No, thank you, Ethan, for everything on this. You know, class out of the whole town, it's really important, and thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
I just want to say, I went to the training at the high school, or the middle school, the auditorium, and I didn't think about the youth commission. I didn't think about the McKinley building until I went to the youth commission meeting, and we talked about it. And it was just something I hadn't thought about, and I wanted to make sure that people had the opportunity to understand that it's, you know, it affects other children outside of our public school system. But did you run into any, and I apologize for getting up at the very beginning, but did you run into any particular unique issues as a result of the aging building, the condition of the building, that you don't have in, let's say, the middle school or the high school?
No, really, there wasn't. I think anything that we needed to do to teach them how to barricade, we were able to kind of adapt. However, we found ways that we could improve. Maybe nothing that would stop us from doing what we needed to, but there's always ways to improve it, right? So we found some areas that we discussed about how to improve without getting too far into it. But I think we decided to make some of those steps to make it so that it's universal across the board with what they need. I mean, there's always challenges, right? Anytime you look at a school, everybody wants a school initially to be an open campus environment. That's why they were all built, so it could be friendly and welcoming, and that's what you want. Unfortunately, some of that has changed how we look and approach the safety of schools, and you know, it's kind of it kind of changes as the society changes, right? You know, we now need to even reevaluate everywhere we look, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the tools at our disposal. It's just how do you apply them and make it work for that school.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure Mr. Mullen can say the same, but with kids and being married to an educator, it's just a role that I just never imagined, you know, our teachers would have to play, especially at, you know, the age of some of the kids that are at, you know, at your building.
Yep.
I can't say enough about the program you put on at the school. It was fantastic. It was really, really good.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Was this also shared with the teen center staff?
So some of it, yes, with the teen center staff, but they're in a very unique situation.
Very unique.
So I haven't talked to Ethan about that yet, but I will.
I'm open to it. You know, with anything within the town, I mean, my role as Alice with the police department, I can kind of, I've talked briefly with somebody at the senior center if we needed to look at different options. But there's a lot of things that have to go into it, but we can make it work for any group that needs us to come talk to them.
I think it's great that the conversation has started, and I think it's great that we have someone like Ethan in our community that is taking charge of all of this and kind of moving us forward. So, thank you.
Any other, I'm sorry.
That's all right. And just real quick, the parent presentation is on the WRPS YouTube page if people do want to watch it. I don't know if it's my best work, but you can at least watch it, and I'm on there. Yeah, exactly.
Have you considered doing it for maybe the library or doing it for even town hall?
I'm like I said, I'm open to everything. It's a new program, and just rolling it out takes a while. It's not especially when you bring in younger kids. For adults, it's like, all right, just go do it. But with kids, how do you roll this out so that nobody's traumatized by what you're doing? It's a very sensitive and a very delicate subject especially when you're looking at kids in kindergarten or up. Yep. I mean, I have children in elementary school myself, and I have to have the discussion with them about how is it done in your school? How do they explain it to you? And then we can all work it. It's just a very delicate thing to bring up. So
I mean, I can tell you, I have a senior in high school, and I also have a middle school student. She's in 7th grade, and the last time that you went to a stay in place, my high school student knew what to do. I mean, she's been around me enough. We've talked about it enough at the dinner table and had conversations. So she was ready to go if anything needed to happen. But I can tell you that, Ethan, I know that there's a children's book out there. Kathy Paulding has it, right?
Yes, it's from Alice. I'm not scared. I'm prepared. From what recent research shows, it's sold out through the Alice webpage, but Amazon does carry it if you need to talk to younger kids about it.
So that's something that parents should really consider, and we'll be sending out information about that throughout our building. And certainly, if anyone wants to contact me, I'd be happy to talk to them. But Ethan's really the expert.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 8, review of special town meeting warrant. Mr. Chalker.
Mr. Chairman, those of you with your books, there was a draft of the articles, just the list. There was a supplemental piece that you received this evening. The warrant for special town meeting had closed on yesterday, so we've been working hard to make sure it's updated and things are spelt right. But I believe it's on page 3 or 4 of the updated version. The special town meeting warrant articles, which we will be forwarding with your approval. The stabilization account, as you know, we're trying to keep the stabilization under special town meeting. We did receive, I should announce at this point, we just received yesterday our free cash number, and it is just about where we expected. It is at $2,300,000 and change. I should point out, we knew last year was an aberration. We anticipated that we would be in the 1.7, 1.8 range. The 2.3 does reflect the fact that we had that 400,000 that we had set aside last year. So we're right in keeping with trying to keep the fiscal state of town in the same place on the free cash number.
Before snow and ice?
Well, we're going to go through that now. So the free cash is now available for spending, and we're going to spend some of it on snow and ice. So we had, we definitely had more requests for items, which we will go through more with finance primarily, but we had more requests, as we do every year, for funding than we have money. Imagine that. It's like living at home with 2 daughters. But the Finance Committee stabilization, we're recommending at this point $184,647. That will keep us at that 5% of our tax levy limit, which is at a little over $36 million. That was a target goal, and quite honestly, it was something that I think I've talked to the board about before. When we got here, it was always a target that I had hoped that we would reach, that previous boards of selectmen and finance committees, it was a goal that we all targeted. We put some serious money into it last year, and we've made, for a while, we were putting 1/3 to 1/4 of all of our free cash into it. So I'm thrilled to point out that this represents, minus the 400,000 we actually had left over from last year, about 10%. So we're in much better shape this year, and hopefully going forward, we won't have to put so many large amounts into stabilization. The Lincoln School, as you know, is really a public safety. I'm continually getting calls. We had thought originally that we'd be able to take it down. Of course, there are some old building materials that require testing. We've got quotes. So the Lincoln School, we're looking for an appropriation of $125,000 to take down the Lincoln School, which is a public safety and/or health issue at this point, and possibly a fire hazard, having just gone through the Park Street property. The SD School building, we might be a little heavy here, but we're not quite sure. Not SD School, excuse me. Don't anyone panic. We're not taking down the SD's auto property. We're assuming that we're going to get a clean enough bill of health to be able to take the building down, put it on the market, and recoup the losses and return it. We had very good reports, which I would be reporting on later on engineering, and we need to do some final testing, but we're trying to put aside $45,000 for the demolition and upgrade of that property, which we hope to recoup at some point. Drainage improvements, as you know, Moncrief Road has its areas. The highway superintendent is asking for $23,000 to clean up Moncrief Road. The library parking lot needs some repairs. There's a $20,000 item in that. We're hoping for some additional state money as we approach that. Some of the work we may be able to do through the ADA account. Unpaid bills, 260 from last year, $267.99. The sick leave buyback account, which we have established overall the past few years, $150,000. Water commissioners are looking to upgrade the water treatment plant for $125,000. An OPEB report, which we must do, is, excuse me, Eric?
Every other year.
Every other year. $8,250. We have $57,000 in for the purchase of 9 copiers. Almost every single copier continually breaks down here at Town Hall. Some of us could probably go to work for the copier company. But and you've seen me in my own office banging the hell out of that machine, but it needs help. The purchase of a diesel fuel pump for the highway department, $45,000. Mr. O'Laughlin, snow and ice, $600,000. And we really thought we were going to get away substantially cheaper, and then March happened. We get all the way through February thinking we're doing well. I would point out in years gone by, a couple of years, we had like $1.2, $1.1 million. So 600,000 certainly is a lot, but it's less than what we've had to face in a couple of the past years. The legal budget, we are substantially lower than most communities. However, and we've intentionally kept it low, knowing, working with the Finance Committee, that we might have to go back. We did ask them for $25,000. We'd like to replace that $25,000 this year. We are in the process of negotiating all of the town contracts, and we did have a couple of unusual legal bills that we've had to. I remind you, we did receive permission for a lien and a reimbursement on one of the court cases. The building next door, which has been in a number of different conditions and garages, and it's just been a constant issue even since I've been here for 10 years. The garage next door here at 258 Union Street is for sale. The list price, we would have to negotiate with them and then probably make some improvements, et cetera. So we were hoping to reappropriate that $4,000 that we weren't able to use down at the other property off of Webster Street for the purchase of that property, with the intent of cleaning it up. It may actually serve as an interim recreation department building as their new building and structure and it gets done at their building. But it would remove, hopefully, an eyesore, possibly give us a gathering point in a little town common, or there may be some grants available. But that would give us the ability, we believe, to both purchase it and do some cleanup. We have to establish the Community Preservation Act funds. So this is on, as money is beginning to come into the town. Community preservation funding is $421,003. That represents all of the money that we anticipate receiving through the CPA this year, and the anticipated 11.5% match we think we're going to get from the state. We're required to appropriate as much. We're required to appropriate everything we anticipate coming in and what we anticipate the match to be. So some of that money, approximately, I believe, 39,000 would actually end up rolling over probably next year into funds, because it would be reimbursed through the match from the state. The fire chief has asked for a transfer of $65,000 as a result of, I think, primarily overtime, and he is here tonight and can talk to you later on about that if necessary. But as you know, when we have these events, like we have had with the storms, that requires a significant amount of overtime, and Sometimes it requires a firefighter standing by a wire for hours on end until National Grid can get there. So they have experienced some fluctuations in their overtime account that were really not anticipated. These storms really took us for a hit. And finally, some Hearts of Park ADA renovations, some of which may be reimbursable. This is closer to a match, but our match would be the $25,000 for our portion for that, and that is the extent of the special town meeting articles. With your approval, we can forward these to the appropriate boards, committees for review, and we can begin to maybe print up the town warrant. Are there any questions?
Don't have any?
Do you have any questions?
No, sorry, that was a no, negative.
Anybody? Anybody want to make a motion?
Make a motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Unanimous vote. Can you lift that hand?
I have
Good?
to use my left hand now.
Okay.
The right hand does not work.
Okay, moving on to item number 10, Town Administrator's Report and Correspondence. I'll get it, don't worry about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. I had free cash in here. We told you what that was.
Thanks.
I've been asked to announce that everywhere except on Union Street, the overnight parking ban has been lifted. The parking ban is in place from North Ave down to Biggins Funeral Home. Also, a reminder to anyone, I know all the town departments received it, but just to let you know, the chief is working on our MEMA filings. There is a chance we can get reimbursed for some of the storm-related damages and costs that we had as a result of those March northeasters. It's done on a county level, so we're assuming with all of the damage done, especially on the shoreline, we might actually qualify here in Rockland, and we certainly had our additional costs as well. So all the departments are used to the drill, but just to let you know, we are pursuing that reimbursement. On healthcare insurance, I wanted to talk to the board and just let you know we have met with all the insurance representatives and union heads, representatives of all the unions regarding the proposals that came before us. There were a couple of cheaper alternatives to our current Blue Cross Blue Shield policies. However, the employees, as well as my own recommendation, was to stay with Blue Cross Blue Shield. That will mean a 0% increase this year, and as you know, we like to talk about us in comparison to, let me kill that, I thought I did. Mayflower, I have heard two different numbers. I've heard 4.5% and 6.5% increase, and I would remind the board that is with reduced benefits for the employees. We worked closely with the employees last year. We assured them that we weren't seeking to increase their costs or their deductibles or any of that. We maintained the plan that we had 3 years ago, and we saved between that and the dental over $500,000, and we're still maintaining that at a 0% increase this year. There is a slight increase in the dental program, but that was contractual. So it still represents a huge savings for the town, and I have to say the employees' unions, I think, were all pleased as well. So we stayed with Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're not experiencing any health care insurance increase. I don't know of another community that can say they did that. ADA update. We had a visitor from the ADA, and I'm drawing a blank on her name. I apologize. It might be in your books. Oh, it is in your book. There's a beautiful picture of me and Ms. Mutter, who was down here from ADA to look at all of the improvements we've been making. She reviewed all of the town hall and the library projects and was very impressed, I have to tell you, with all the work that we've done here, and has asked in a meeting with Marcy and I, Marcy walked around to all of them. We sat in our office, sat in my office for probably close to an hour talking about all the projects we did, and she's actually asked us if we would be a resource for other communities, that we actually did things right, we're doing things right, and we certainly put in a little plug for our next year's application with her. So I think we established a good rapport.
Donation of a slight fee.
But they were very good. Aggregation, I was supposed to attend, I skipped Park Street. We have approval now of all the landowners, and we've signed a contract for the engineers to go in. We know that there was some asbestos at the service, but before we can make a determination on where we're going with Park Street, we need to do a subsurface small examination so we can try and make a decision if we actually have to do more, if we can get away with trying to take the property and enter into an agreement. So we do have permission of the owner, the 3 listed owners of their property, to go ahead, and I expect that that'll happen within the next week or so. The Estes Auto we talked about. Aggregation, I have had probably as many calls on aggregation of electric bills by residents as any. I think you probably all saw in the newspapers this past week Attorney General Healy talking about some of these companies that are out there that give you a great come-on rate, and then they raise the rate and jack the rate, and they cost people usually substantially more money, to the point that they're considering banning that as a possibility for these companies to come in. In the town of Rockland, as you know, we approved aggregation. We were supposed to go before DPU last week, but that was delayed by DPU. That's the last piece of the puzzle we're looking for, along with, I believe it's 6 other communities will be in a pool, and they will send out and get us, hopefully, one low rate for all electric accounts in the town of Rockland. People can, at their own will, they can opt out. Everyone is already automatically opted in. If you choose not to be part of this pool, you can opt out. Streetlight conversion, I am hoping, I've been talking with them, the weather has set them back a couple of times, but I'm hoping will happen maybe as soon as the end of April, and it's about a 3-week process for the entire town, and that should include a few additional lights on Union Street. And that, Mr. Chairman, other than I certainly want to express my condolences to the entire Biggins family. I had to save it for last, because I am one of those guys who gets a little emotional sometimes. Bob Biggins is a great guy, one of the first people I met in town, and he's always been there with a smile and a handshake and even a hug sometimes of support, and I'll certainly miss him, and my heart goes out to the Biggins family. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Selectmen's comments and opinions expressed by individual members do not necessarily reflect the views of all the Board of Selectmen, and are the opinions and comments of only the individual member. With that, Ms. Hall?
No comments.
Thank you. Mr. O'Laughlin?
Yeah, just a couple. Thursday, April 5th, the Republican and Democratic town committees are holding candidates night for this year's election. It's a great opportunity to meet the candidates running for office. This year featured will be the candidates for the Board of Health, town clerk, and school committee. Deirdre and I participated in it last year, and I thought it did a great job showing the candidates. So I've been talking all year about getting involved. This is a great opportunity to get involved and see what's out there for candidates and make informed decisions. Along with Alan, I also want to express my condolences to Dan Biggins and the entire Biggins family. I didn't know Bob well, but in the few interactions I had with Bob, he was just an absolute gentleman. You know, I looked at his Facebook page the other day, and he had a quote that was up there, and it said, "Funerals are not about celebrating the life that ended or mourning the life that ended. It's about celebrating the life that was lived." So over the next few days, you know, with the wake and the funeral, I think that's a great message, and celebrate the life of who seemed to be a really great guy, who was surrounded by great family and friends at all times.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan?
Yeah, there's been a lot of sadness around Rockland, not just for Bob Biggins, other people too, but it is a part of life, and you just have to remember the happy moments of everybody who enters and leaves our life. Some of it way too quick, and others aren't. But there's no call no reason. You know, I look at life, and life is not ordered, life is chaos, quite frankly, and we just have to sift through it when we can. To the Biggins family, the whole town is with you, and we're going to miss Bob and everybody, you know, it's just too bad. Other than that, get out and vote. Vote's coming up, I know, a couple Saturdays, next Saturday, is it? A week, 2 weeks? So 2 weeks, get out there and vote. You know, normally we have about 2,200 people vote in an election like this. I'd like to see more people make the effort to get out there and let us know you're listening to us. The more voters that get out there, then the more that we know that there are people within the town of Rockland who care. So that's how you let us know. With that, I'm done too.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Strang. Mr. Mullen?
First of all, I just want to announce Saturday, April 28th, will be Rockland's cleanup day. Typically, the event is sponsored and hosted by the Open Space Committee and the Park Department with great support from Home Depot. This year, the cleanup day is also expanding a little bit from the traditional rail trail route to downtown, to the center, and Reimagine Rockland is very proud and excited to be part of that expansion and to be working with the Open Space Committee and the Park Department on that. So, like everyone from our town is welcome to participate and help. We'll be starting at 8:30 in the morning. We'll be finishing up at 12 o'clock. And we'll be kicking everything off here on the 28th at Town Hall. So we'll be mulching, we'll be raking, we'll be picking up trash and branches, and a whole bunch of things. And probably sometime this week, like on the Reimagine Rockland Facebook page, we're gonna have a Google sign up where we can hopefully encourage folks and groups, whether they're the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, any community organization who wants to join with us and to be part of it, to sign up to help. Also this year, at the end of the cleanup day, we're also going to be having a community cookout, and like we've been working and talking with the Lions Club, who are all set, I have just heard. So that is great news. So more information will be coming on that. Secondly, I just want to join with everyone here like in offering my sincere condolences to the Biggins family. The past 10 years or so, I've known Bob through like civic work and community work here. I've become very good friends with Dan, who's just like an incredible guy with an incredible family. But actually, the first time I met Bob goes back to when I was in 5th grade, and I became an altar server, and he taught me how to be an altar server. And a year later, actually, when my grandmother died, he asked me if I wanted to altar serve her funeral. And when he originally asked me, I said no. But then the day of the funeral, we walked in, and he came right up to me, and he pulled me aside, and he told me that that I was going to do it. And knowing that that's how Bob was, and that's what he knew, looking back all these years, what I would really value is really just what Bob Biggins was all about. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people have their own Bob Biggins story, and that touched him, that touched his family, and so many of us. And I can go on and on, but just really heartbreaking. And lastly, I'll just leave. This is actually my last meeting until I'm hopefully reelected next week. It's been a great 2 years or so, but I just want to reemphasize and take a moment to reemphasize one thing, that all of us up here are volunteers. I have a wife, and I have 2 one-year-old twins at home. And usually, depending on the week, I'm out about 2 or 3, maybe sometimes even 4 nights a week. And it's something that my wife is supportive of because she loves our town. It's something that hopefully my twins will be supportive of, and when they realize. But the point is, like I love this community, and this is my hometown. It's where I was born, raised. It's the community where, like I wanted to stay and raise my family. And as a member of this Board of Selectmen, every decision, everything I've been involved in, everything I have not been involved in has been for the best interests of this community and nothing else. And, I'll just leave it at that. But, I can't really thank the residents of Rockland for, and, I'm sure we all feel like this, for the humbling feeling it is to know that residents continue to place their faith in you, to continue leading our town forward. That they know, you're in it because you love Rockland, we love Rockland, and because we care. And it's humbling to know that, and it's humbling to know at the end of the day we have a great community and we have a whole great group of people behind us. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
When recent polls show that Mr. Blank is ahead, 54-36. So
good luck to you.
You have your work cut out for you. You can put a sign in my yard.
Thank you, Larry.
Welcome. Huh?
You do know it's not unopposed, right?
I'm just thanking people, that's all.
I had the opportunity yesterday to travel into the MSBA once again with our superintendent, assistant superintendent, and one member of the school committee. And there they reaffirmed the school building committee's choice for the owner's project manager. So that project is now, the feasibility study portion is officially underway with the blessing of the MSBA. So the next step is to pick an architect and come up with some renderings, figure out where this thing's going to go, come up with some options that we can bring to the residents, and then make an educated decision there for a new elementary school in the future. The estimated timeline is approximately about 16 to 18 months to get it ready and presented to the residents. And during that course of time, in the first, we'll say, 10 months to a year, I think with the site selection and design, will start to take shape. So it's interesting, and at the same time, it was refreshing to go back before that board and see some old faces and know that Rockland was in line again. And it's nice to know that of all government state agencies, that the MSBA actually is one of the ones, through big funding, through the lottery and things like that, give back to the communities. I mean, and we also had great news that Rockland's reimbursement rate was actually increased by another 2.4%. So that was good news as well. So the other thing I had done was I went to my first Reimagine Rockland meeting, and I was surprised at how many people were actually there. And my fellow board members have been involved in that, and it was actually nice to see the younger members, as me and Larry being, we'll say, the elder members now, actually interacting and bringing things forward for the town. It's actually refreshing. It was a nice feeling to know that we have people out there who are actually willing to take that challenge on.
We got you back.
Yeah. Well,
Doing a great job.
Yeah.
All 3 years. Great
And actually, it was good to catch up with some old friends and foes there, and know that we're on the same side of some issues. So, I mean, I know that's politics, but it's actually good, you know, that we could come full circle. I don't know if there was a picture or not, but I have a friendly foe that we are now on the same side of a item with, which is actually, it's actually encouraging because it goes to show that, you know, Rockland has definitely changed and changed for the better. And that just more than illustrates the fact that, you know, we may have had differences in the past over issues and items, but we can come full circle and then align ourselves with things that are better for the town of Rockland. So I think this says a lot. I wanted to remind some of the board members that there's a breakfast tomorrow at 7:30 for the school. It's a business luncheon, excuse me, breakfast. And part of that purpose is to go through and inform the local community business leaders of what's going to be happening in the future with the school. And then lastly, I want to comment, there was a article in the Ledger over the weekend that it depicted Rockland in a light that I want people to understand is not the light that's out there. I'm not going to mention the article or the individual by name, but I was actually a little upset when I read the article because I grew up with the particular individual, and you know, the way the picture was painted by the press, I don't think they did any justice to Rockland because it was a one-sided story. It's not the Rockland that I've grown up in. It's not the Rockland that I live in. It's not the Rockland that I raised my children in, and it's certainly not the Rockland anybody that I know supports. So I just wanted to get that out there because it's important for people to know that, you know, as being a member of the Board of Selectmen, when you read something like that, and it's taken, it's put in a situation where it paints a picture much differently than what was there. And, you know, all I can say is that based on the position and based on what that individual does for, performs for duty for the town of Rockland, all I can say is that this board and other boards, I would hope in the future, would stand the ground for the town of Rockland because it's unacceptable to have behavior like that. It's unacceptable not to perform to your finest for Rockland. And because it's an employment issue, I really can't say much more than that. But I want the people to know that, you know, for whatever reason, I don't know where they got the story from or where they got the quotes from, but it is definitely not the Rockland that I'm proud of and grew up in. And I know that echoes a lot of people. So with that, we have an executive session
Make a motion to,
for contract negotiations with the town administrator and contract negotiations update with town unions.
not to reconvene.
Second.
All those in favor? It has to be a roll call.
Aye.
Yes, aye.
Aye. Aye. Thank you all, and good night. Thank